On today's episode of Locked On Hurricanes, it's time to rank the top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains, and one of them, who is got a jersey retirement, does not make the top 3.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I am the Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawk Bears. I am also the Chicago Wolves columnist of Wolves Weekly over there as well. I am the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got an exciting Tuesday episode for everyone. As like I said at the start of the show, we are going to be going over the rankings of who I think are the top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains of all time. And yes, you did hear me right in the teaser at the start of the show. A guy whose number is retired, I think, is not in the top 3. So you're going to have to stay and just tune into the show and see who didn't make the top 3 but is in the top 5. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So just to go over the list of Carolina Hurricanes captains. Now, we are only going over from when the team got relocated. So there's going to be no Hartford Whalers captains. It's just going to be from the Carolina Hurricanes when they got relocated to Raleigh/Greensboro and to where we are at presently in 2024. So going over the list, we do have Kevin Dineen, who was the captain for the Hurricanes from 1997-98. Keith Primo from 98 to 99. Then we got Ron Francis from 1999-2000 all the way to 03-04. Rod Brind'amour from 05-06 to part of the 2009-10 season. Then Eric Stahl took over around then until about 2015-16. Then we had Justin Falk and Jordan Stahl for that weird co-captain year. Gosh, what a time that was. For 2017-18, then Justin Williams took over for the 18-19 season, and now we are in the Jordan Stahl era as captain from 2019 to the present times. Now, to start this off, and I know it's going to be very, very interesting. I'm really curious to see what everyone's thoughts are when everyone listens to the episode, and I guess get your thoughts on where I was right or where I was wrong. But of course, we got to kick it off with our number 5. Now, for me, it was kind of tough to pick the number 5, but I think it's the fact of the longevity of this guy and where he was. And I think just by unfortunate circumstances of kind of the era that the Hurricanes were in for most of his captaincy, like you kind of have to put him in the top 5, but it kind of stinks because you would hope what would have happened if he actually got to be able to see success like his brother has, and maybe somewhat you saw from even the other captains who are higher up on the list. And that is Eric Stahl. The captain from the 2009-10 season where he kind of split it with Rod Brind'amour, and that's through the 2015-16 season. Now, the thing with Eric Stahl, because he was captain at 25 until he was 31 years old, and you look at the 2009-10 season, the team finished 3rd out of 5th in the division in the Southeast, 35, 37, and 10. And then pretty much, you had Paul Maurice all next year for 2010-11, where they went 40, 31, and 11, still finished 3rd in the division. And then you look at 2011-12, finished dead last. You saw Maurice get, yanked. And then Kirk Muller finished out that year. And then you look at Kirk Muller all the way through the 2013-14 season. And then unfortunately, we get the really bad era of Bill Peters being the head coach for 4 seasons. Honestly, 2 seasons too long, where he finished last, 6th, 7th, and 6th in his tenure through 2017-18. And you're pretty much talking the real dark days of the Carolina Hurricanes, because 2010-11 is what it is. Same thing for 11-12, where you kind of see that changeover. You know, wasn't a great year. They did get third place again in 2012-13, but then after that, it's been kind of all downhill for those 5 years. And for me, it just kind of stinks when you look at Eric Stahl and the fact that you look at a guy with 100, who's the only player to have 100 plus, you know, had a 100-point season, won the Stanley Cup and stuff like that. And you see him, he takes over as the captain for the Hurricanes after, you know, Rod Brind'amour. That's some tough shoes to fill. When you're talking about the guy who won the Stanley Cup for the team in 2006, now you're the captain, like essentially 4 seasons later. You go through Paul Maurice for a couple of years, and you switch over to Kirk Muller. Doesn't really work out too well, and then you go into the really bad Bill Peters era, where just Jim Rutherford was still running the team. Then you had Ron Francis for a little while. Karmanos is still the owner. It just didn't really work out, where the team just couldn't. The Hurricanes just could not fill a team, and it was basically Eric Stahl and a couple other guys. And other than that, it was really about it. Goaltending was never really there. You're talking about, you know, you're trying to run a team that has Jeff Skinner, and then, like I said, a bunch of dudes. And you do get, luckily, you get Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, and all them kind of later on into the tenure. But at that point, it's like, what can you really do if you're the team? Like, you look at those 5 seasons where you go from the last year of Kirk Muller, where you finished 7th, to the 4 years of Bill Peters. Your best finish was 6th, and that was twice. You finished dead last once, and you finished 7th again. Overall, it's just not really a good time for the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think even for Eric Stahl, you would have to imagine that's kind of where he wishes he had more of a, I guess, more help in a sense, because you look at how his seasons were. You know, he takes over as captain in 2009-10, he had 70 points. 2010-11, he had 76. 70 the year after that in 2011-12. Then you're looking at 53, 61, 54, and then you're talking 15-16, which is basically kind of towards, you know, the very back end of Bill Peters. You know, that was his second year, and that's kind of where it's you give 33 points in 63 games. And then the year talking about you don't have a captain for 16-17. And that's the second to last year for Bill Peters. And then you have that weird co-captain year with, you know, his brother Jordan and Justin Falk. So for Eric, it's like you basically get 2 years of Bill Peters, and then you don't have a captain for a year. Then you get the random co-captain thing. And I think it's just, I would love to put Eric Stahl a lot higher on the list, but I mean, he does beat out, you know, some guys. You know, Keith Primo had a year. Okay. I mean, he did it 62 points, but you can definitely tell that Keith Primo didn't really want to be in Carolina. That's why they got rid of him, to bring in Rod Brind'amour and stuff like that. So while there's another guy on this list who did have 1 year as captain, I think for the impact that he had, I think that's why you don't see a guy like Keith Primo being on this list. And I would love to say Kevin Dineen too, because, you know, he, longtime Whaler legend, was the first captain in Carolina for 97-98. But it's one of those things where, you know, Justin Falk was a co-captain. You would like to see you could give it to Justin Falk, but also not really, because it was kind of like, how do you give someone a top 5 spot in the all-time captains list when you're kind of co-captaining with another guy? I mean, I could be wrong. I guess some people might view that as, okay, well, he was still a captain in some aspect. But I think if you look at the other guys who are kind of on the list, I mean, there's like, just like your head coaches, where you've only had 5 coaches in Carolina Hurricanes history, you're not talking a lot of captains overall, because you got Jordan Stahl, Justin Williams. Yes, you kind of count Justin Falk. You have Eric Stahl, Rod Brind'amour, Rod Francis, Keith Primo, and Kevin Dineen. You're talking 8 captains, 7.5 if you want to say the co-captain thing. But just for the sake of argument, you're talking about 8 captains overall in team history, and you're looking at, like I said, 5 coaches. So you're looking at 6, 7, 8. You're not really leaving a bunch of other guys out that could have say, oh, here's your top 5 captain for the Hurricanes of all time. You're talking 1 year of Primo, 1 year of Dineen, and that's after the team just moved from Hartford. And then you have Justin Falk on a weird co-captain year. So it's kind of like and it's nothing against Eric Stahl. Like, yeah, he has to be in the top 5 because he actually had a good tenure as a captain. Like I said, from 2009-10 to 2015-16, that's a good run of time as a captain of the Carolina Hurricanes. And unfortunately, almost his entire captaincy was basically just the Hurricanes weren't good. It was during the dark ages of the team, and it kind of was a bad run for him, all things considered. When you look at, like I said, you have the 1 year of not having a captain, then you have the co-captaincy, and then the year after that, you're talking after that weird experiment in 17-18, Rod Brind'amour takes over, and then you got Jordan Stahl, and then you have Justin Williams as your captain. And then it's Jordan Stahl, and we all know how that run's been for the Hurricanes since all that started. So you can't put Eric Stahl in the top 5. There's no way he's not in the top 5 when you got 2 guys had a year as a captain, and then you had 1 guy who was a co-captain for a season. So it's not really a process of elimination. It's just that you're looking at the tenures of some of these guys. It makes sense why Eric's in the top 5. Just because of what he did. Like, he was the captain of the team. He was basically the guy for the Hurricanes for a very long time during the dark ages when you're finishing 6th, 7th, 8th. Never really stiff in the playoffs for a long time, and arguably one of your best players. I know a lot of people can say, well, he didn't do enough, but it's like, you look at the roster, like, there's not much you can do with that. So while I wish he did have a better rosters to go with, I kind of feel bad for him as a captain, to where it was kind of like, what can you really do? So you just kind of feel bad for Eric Stahl in terms of how that really worked out for him. So that is our number 5 captain. So now we are going to go into our number 4 and our number 3 captains. And this is, I think, we're going to get very, very interesting in terms of how fans are going to react to who's at number 4 and who's at number 3. Because, like I said, one of these guys whose name is retired is not in the top 3, and we'll figure out who that is here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring them huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Welcome back to segment 2 for Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So now we're going into our number 4 and our number 3 selections of our captains for the all-time top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains list. And this is where I think a lot of people might get upset with me. You know what? Hey, I just think this is, like I said, this is just my own personal list. If you think very differently, let me know in the comments what you think your top 5 would be, or let me know how you feel about this guy, number 4. And for me, it's Ron Francis. Yeah, I mean, he was the captain from 1999, 2000 to 2003, 2004. Of course, we go into the lockout. There was no captain in 04, 05. Go into the lockout year. We come out of it. Ron Francis is no longer with the Hurricanes. We don't know who's the captain after that. But, yeah, I have Ron Francis as the number 4 captain of all time for the Hurricanes. And, yes, his number is retired. It's in the rafters. I know a lot of people like Ron Francis. And you know what? Hey, I like Ronnie Francis too. I have nothing against him. It's just you look at how his tenure was from 1999 to 2000. His first year as captain, the team finishes 3rd out of 5th. Didn't make the playoffs. Following season, 2000, 2001, they finished 38-32, 9-3, and they lost in the NHL Conference quarterfinals. Second in the division, the Southeast. So they got better. They made the playoffs, lost in the quarterfinals. Following season, we all know what happened after that. They won the Southeast Division, 35-26-15-5. They lost in the Stanley Cup final to the Detroit Red Wings in 6 games. So, okay, the Hurricanes made the playoffs a couple of years, got a Stanley Cup appearance against the Detroit Red Wings. course, you're talking about the Detroit Red Wings of, the 90s and 2000s. Oh boy, I'm talking about loaded rosters, but hey, they did pretty good for their first ever Cup final appearance, I believe. So you have to enjoy that if you're a Hurricanes fan and how that worked out. Now, 2002, 2003, the Hurricanes finished dead last in the Southeast, 22, 43, 11, and 6. And then in the last year of Ron Francis as the captain of the Hurricanes before the lockout, they finished 28, 34, 14, and 6 for third in the Southeast. And this is where you see that first changeover from Paul Maurice to Peter Laviolette. Laviolette took over, finished 20, 22, 6, and 4, where Maurice kind of started that year 8, 12, 8, and 2. So, and I know a lot of people are going to ask, well, Ron Francis' numbers retired. He did all this stuff for the Canes, which he did. I'll give him a lot of credit. You're talking his first year, 36 years old, he had 73 points, 23 goals, 50 assists. Following season 2000, 2001, when they made the playoffs for the first time, he had 65 points. So, okay. You make the playoffs for the second time ever. This was under Ron Francis. And, then you talk about the year after that when they made the Cup final, 77 points, 27 goals. So that's 3 straight years of 50 assists. Okay. I see where you're coming from. And then 2002, 2003, 57 points. And then his last year with the Hurricanes at age 40, he still had 30 points in 68 games. So yes, accolades-wise, he was putting up points. He was doing a really great job for the Hurricanes individually. And he was great. He was a great captain. But you also look at the team, like same thing with Eric Stahl. I think he was a good captain. He did lead the team in a lot of points and did a lot of things for them as well. But you look at unfortunately for Eric Stahl, where it didn't really work out for him was they never made the playoffs. And it was a lot of bad Hurricanes teams. Now, Ron Francis was on some okay Hurricanes teams. Comparatively speaking, yes, when he took over in 1999, 2000, he finished third, then finished second, and then first. Quarterfinals his second year as captain, Stanley Cup final his second year, and then he finished dead last in the Southeast, and then he finished third with a coaching change. And I mean, there's nothing much you can do as a captain. It is what it is. But he did do a lot of stuff for the Hurricanes, especially the fact that you're looking at his last year as a captain. He was 40, so you're talking late 30s, going on to 40 for Ron Francis. You're talking about a couple playoff appearances and stuff like that, and I know when I go to my number one selection, I know a lot of people are going to be like, okay, well, if you're looking at how many playoff appearances, these guys are kind of the same. But if you really look at who number one's going to be, they kind of did a little bit more in the playoffs of what, with those teams and what Ron Francis did with his teams. And it could be a controversial take that you could say that Ron Francis should be in the top 3. I think the guys who are in the top 3 kind of have more overall leadership and more not overall leadership as they're in better leaders, but you see what the success around the team with them is and how they've impacted the team as well, and just being captain. So it's a very objective how you want to look at these rankings. And for me, I like Ron Francis. He did a lot. He put up points. He did what he could for the Hurricanes teams. But you look at his tenure as captain. Finished second, finished first, and then finished last and finished third. So you're talking about 2 playoff appearances, 1 Stanley Cup final appearance. So, I mean, you can't really go wrong with the top 5 when you have 8 total captains. And like I said, I know number 2 and number 3 are going to be very interesting. I'm really curious to see how people are going to react to those. And, of course, like I said, number 1, you can still look at the number of playoff appearances and stuff like that. But I think whoever's the guys at number 1, I think – the accolades kind of speak for themselves in terms of individually, as a team, and stuff like that, and just the impact that they had on the franchise overall. And Ron Francis had some impact on the team. He even became the GM at one point too. But I just kind of think, if you look at this overall list of what guys have done so far, I think he's 4th. You could make the argument putting him 3rd. But that's just kind of where I feel like that is with Ron Francis. Now, speaking of number 3, and this is where it's going to get, like I said, interesting once again in terms of how fans are going to react to this, because I know a lot of people are kind of wishy-washy on him now. Jordan Staal is, for me, the number 3 Carolina Hurricanes captain. Now, yes, you're not talking points-wise of all the stuff that Ron Francis has done, but you look at what Jordan Stahl has done, and now you take out that weird co-captain thing when he was 29. I don't know what I could do, but you can't blame the guy for being named a co-captain with Justin Falk. That was just an experience of itself. But you look at him and the fact that ever since he took over as the full-time guy, 2019-2020, he had 27 points, then followed by 38, 36, 34, and 30. But here's the thing with Jordan Stahl as the captain of the Carolina Hurricanes since 2019-20, made the playoffs. They did lose in the first round, but of course that was, that weird COVID season thing. It was a whole different thing of itself. And then you look at, they make it the following year, 2020-21, they won that weird Central Division for that half season. They lost in the second round. Following year, they finished first again, and that was the Metro Division. They went back to the normal, everyone went back to their divisions, lost in the second round. But then, following year, lost in the conference final against the Florida Panthers, but they won the division again for 3 straight division titles. In this past season, they finished second in the division behind the President's Trophy New York Rangers, and they're only 3 points back. And of course, they lost eventually to the New York Rangers in the second round. But you're talking about him being as a captain, where you're talking 5 straight playoff appearances, 3 straight division titles, and you got an Eastern Conference final appearance in that as well. And of course, you're talking about a guy who has a lot of talent around him. And I still think that's overall, you really can't snuff what Jordan Stahl has done. You're talking about a guy like Jordan Stahl, who honestly should have won a Selke already, but he's done a lot for the Hurricanes. You're talking about one of the best defensive centers in the game, always a shutdown guy, constantly wins you faces all the time. Has been regarded by a lot of guys around the league as one of the hardest players to play against. And it wasn't, like I said, if it wasn't for Patrice Bergeron and all these other guys, Jordan Stahl would have at least 1 or 2 Selkes by this point. And like I said, I know points-wise he's nowhere near Ron Francis is at. You could make the argument that it could be like Eric at 5, Jordan at 4, or flip them around and the Stahls are 4 and 5 somewhere, and Ron Francis could be your 3. But for me, honestly, if you look at what Jordan has done, he's led by example. He rarely misses a game. Yes, the points aren't there, but you're talking about a guy who does his job that what Rod Brind'amour wants him to do. And that's what he says all the time. As long as you're doing your job, that's all I really care about. And Jordan Stahl, game in, game out, year in, year out, he does his job. He's a shutdown defensive center who, like I said, should have won some Selkes already, but is a guy who's consistently being that leader for the Carolina Hurricanes. And you're talking 5 of the 6 straight playoff appearances that you've seen from the Hurricanes lately, he's been the captain. 3 straight division titles, Eastern Conference final appearance. Like, you can say, okay, well, it's all surrounds the team. It's not just what he's done, but it's like, if you look at how he is, like, a lot of the guys love Jordan Stahl. They respect him. They love him as the captain of the team. I mean, Rod Brind'amour named him the captain, and he's still been the captain ever since. And he is highly regarded around the organization and the NHL as well. So it's one of those things where, yeah, points-wise, okay, sure, he's not where Ron Francis is at. His numbers aren't retired like Ron Francis. But at the same time, too, though, Jordan Stahl's been the captain for the last 5 years, and you're talking a lot of accolades in terms of team success with him as the captain of the team. Like I said, it could just, you could say, oh, well, it's the team around him. It's not just him. Okay, yeah, you could say that, but he's still the captain. He still leads by example, and still the voice, one of the voices. Yeah, he might be quiet on camera and in front of the public, but he could be, more of a quiet leader in the locker room too, or someone that the guys still lean on. So he's got that veteran presence. He's won a Stanley Cup. He won it with the Penguins. So he's been there and done that. He's been in Carolina for a very long time. So yeah, you can make the argument that he could maybe be 4th and Ron Francis is 3rd. But for me, you look at the overall aspect of what he's done for the Hurricanes and how he's been as a leader. You can't look at the playoff success and not act like that Jordan Stahl isn't a top 3 captain for the Hurricanes. But let me know what you think. Do you think that Do you think Jordan Stahl should be 4th or 5th? Do you think Ron Francis should be in the top 3? So I'm really curious to see how everyone's going to react to my number 3 and my number 4 for the all-time captains. But that will leave us with our top 2, and I think this is where a lot of people are going to be kind of like, interesting. So we'll get to that for my top 2 Hurricanes captains of all time here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Gametime is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The things I like about the Gametime app is the fact that you get the really good last-minute deals, along with their flash and zone deals, and their view from Seat Finder is very, very cool when it comes to looking at how your seats are going to be before you even go to the venue itself. Now, talking about their last-minute deals, you can actually save up to 60% off when buying last-minute tickets, not just for sports, but for concerts, comedies, theater, and so much more. So it's not even just about sports. It's just about everyday hobby stuff that you like. You can get tickets for and get deals for those as well. With their flash deals, you can save more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Plus, with their zone deals, this is one where you can choose the section and let the Gametime app choose the seat for you. And talking about seats, their Seat Viewer is probably one of my best features on the entire app that I like myself. You get panoramic views from your seat in the app before you buy, so you don't have to worry about obstructive views or bad angles. You actually get to see your seat before you buy the tickets, so when you get there, you can just go and just enjoy the experience. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. We are now into the top 2 of my top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains of all time. I can already tell that 4 and 3 are going to make things very interesting in terms of how fans are going to react to it. And I think number 2 is going to make it even more interesting, and maybe number 1, who knows. But number 2 for me, it will be Justin Williams, who for me is the second best Carolina Hurricanes captain of all time. And yes, I know it. Some people are going to be like, second? Really? He only did it for one season. How could he be the number 2 captain of all time? I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 37 years old, did put up 53 points, 23 goals, 30 assists, and his 1 year as the captain of the Hurricanes. They did make it to the conference final, and that was the first year under Rod Brind'amour where they did finish 4th in the division. And that was probably that year where they had the big upset against the Washington Capitals. A lot of people thought the Hurricanes are going to get smoked in that matchup against the Capitals. But guess what? They came back, won in Game 7 in overtime. Thank you to Brock McGinn. But this for me is why Justin Williams is number 2. And that's because the culture shift that Justin Williams had made on the Carolina Hurricanes, along with, Rod Brind'amour. A lot of people were wondering where the storm surges came on. Some people are saying it was Rod Brind'amour that kind of started it. It was Justin Williams that started it. Honestly, I think they both started it. They both really started it. And they're just trying to figure out who, they just like, it doesn't really matter who actually did it, but those are the 2 guys who kind of did that storm surge. Got the bunch of jerks moniker from Don Cherry, and they kind of rode on it for a few seasons. But this is the year where you're coming off the co-captains of Falk and Stahl. Dav made the playoffs in the last 10 years. Justin Williams is coming back. You needed a culture shift. You're like, okay, we need a bona fide voice in the locker room. Justin Williams has been there for the Hurricanes before. He's been there and done that. Won the Stanley Cup. Got the icing goal in the Game 7 in 2006 when they won the Cup against the Edmonton Oilers. Rod Brind'amour loves Justin Williams. That's his guy. He's like, all right, if I'm coach, Justin Williams is going to be the captain. And talk about an impact. A guy in the locker room who had a bunch of young guys Some of those guys have been through the last few years of the bad run for the Hurricanes as the franchise with Bill Peters as head coach. And they needed a voice, a guy who's been there and could kind of lead the young guys along the way. And that's what Justin Williams was. And him, along with Brind'amour, did the culture shift to where now you see 6 straight playoff appearances. You see where this complete turnaround of like not a lot of people in PNC Arena to where the building's completely full, selling out every game now. Like it's a constant success for the Hurricanes. You're on a run of 6 straight playoff appearances. And that first one came with Justin Williams as the captain of the team. And like I said, a culture shift that the Hurricanes really needed, because you're talking about a team who were hearing rumblings of relocations. Players didn't want to go to Carolina just because of how bad it was. And you get Justin Williams to come in, buys into what Rod Brind'amour wants in terms of how the team was going to be run, was a great captain. Yes, he did it for one season. And of course, like I said, yeah, Justin Falk did it for a year. Yes, you had Keith Primo did it for a year. Kevin Dineen did it for a year. But you're looking at a guy who made an impact as a captain, even if it's for one season. Williams had more of an impact, I believe, than pretty much any of the other captains that come from 3 through 5. And like I said, and one of them is Ron Francis, whose numbers retired, but of course he did a lot for the franchise, for the Whalers and the Hurricanes. And you kind of have to, put that respect on Ron Francis. But if you look at a guy who had a 1-year impact of a culture shift to where we are now as fans of the Carolina Hurricanes and just the team as a whole, Justin Williams did that. He did that. And yes, there's, Rod, and you look at everyone in the front office and stuff like that. But for me, it's one of those things where, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with having Justin Williams as the number 2 Carolina Hurricanes captain of all time. You could make the argument for 3, but for me, it's what he's done for this team on and off the ice, because he's still with the Hurricanes now. A lot of guys still revere him. They still go talk to him. A lot of the current guys like him. Even guys that he was teammates with, even was for a season, still loved him. Still highly respected, still lives in the area, still has a voice within the organization. He's still making impacts now, even off the ice. But you're talking about a guy who made an impact as a captain even for a season. Yeah, I'd have Justin Williams number 2. Culture shift. If Justin Williams doesn't come back, who knows where the Carolina Hurricanes are at? Yeah, Rod Brind'amour still been your head coach, but who's that player in the locker room with young guys? Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Jacob Slavin, Brett Pesce, all those guys. Justin Williams was that guy for the Hurricanes, and perfect timing to bring in Rod Brind'amour as your head coach, and you got Justin Williams as your captain. So let me know what you think. Do you think Justin Williams should be number 2, or do you put him at 3, or do you put him outside of it? But for me, I think it's Justin Williams, because just how much of an impact he had and how much of a culture shift that he helped with the Carolina Hurricanes. And number 1, by process of elimination, I think you already know who number 1's going to be. It's Rod Brind'amour. And yes, like I said, talking about Ron Francis, you look at what he did as a captain. He was the captain of the Hurricanes from 2005, 2006 to 2009-10, where they kind of switched over to Eric Stahl. And people are like, okay, well, Ron Francis only had 2 playoff appearances as captain for the Hurricanes. So did Rod Brind'amour. So how come he's so much higher on the list compared to Ron Francis? Well, however, the fact that he never really finished worse than 3rd. And that's even including the year where they finished third in 2009-10, where he kind of swapped his captaincy with Eric Stahl. The worst they ever finished with him as the captain was 3rd. First year as captain, won a division. Oh, and they also won the Stanley Cup under the new rules after coming out of the lockout. 52, 22, and 8. Can't really beat that if you go win the cup your first year as captain. Next year, it wasn't a great year. 40, 34, and 8. You finished 3rd. After that, you finished 2nd, 43, 33, and 6. But unfortunately, didn't get enough points you needed. Even though you got 92, didn't make it. Hockey's weird. But then the following season, you Finished with 97 points, 45-30-7. Finished second in the division. Pierre Laviolette was the coach, 12-11-2. Kicked him out. Paul Maurice comes back for his second run as the team, as the head coach, 33-19-5. You make the playoffs that year. You lose in the conference final. But hey, still did pretty good, though, for the fact that your two playoff runs as the captain for the Carolina Hurricanes, if you're Rod Brind'amour, in fact, you got a conference final and a cup final win out of it, compared to Ron Francis, who had a quarterfinal loss and he lost in the cup final. So, yeah, I would say that, yeah, 2 playoff appearances for each of those guys, but I think Rod Brind'amour is number one, just because of the fact that you guys Stanley Cup, a lot of clutch moments as the captain of the team, especially against the Sabres, especially against the Devils at certain points. 2-time Selke winner, back-to-backed it. I mean, yeah, he's got the accolades. Should be in the Hall of Fame, but that's a different conversation for another time. I mean, I've already talked about it on the show. But his number's retired as well, obviously, as it should be, because, hello, it's Rod Brind'amour. And we're not even talking about his impact as a coach, because I'll do a coach ranking. Don't get me wrong. We are definitely doing a coach ranking this week. So looking at just the player aspect of it, Rod Brind'amour, for me, and you could say I'm biased because I'm a big Rod Brind'amour guy. I think he's the greatest captain of all time for the Carolina Hurricanes. Yes, still had the same amount of playoff appearances as Ron Francis did, but both of his runs were deep. Got a conference final appearance, but he did win a Stanley Cup. So he did make a cup final like Ron Francis did, but got it done. And like I said, had an Eastern Conference final appearance. They got swept, but still made it. 2-time Selke winner, back-to-back. Guys never retired just like Ron Francis, but for me, I think Rod Brind'amour had a massive impact. And I think that's why a lot of people love Rod Brind'amour, because, Ron Francis did become a GM. Now he's in Seattle. A lot of people still revere him, but you look at Rod Brind'amour, he's been in Carolina basically his entire life after being traded from the Philadelphia Flyers in 99-2000. Lives in Carolina. His kids are even junior Hurricanes. And like I said, we'll talk about the coaching impact, but even as a player impact to where he is now, going into a coach, he brought hardware to Carolina, individually and as a team. And yes, you're still talking about guys that were surrounding him that helped out too. Eric Stahl, Ray Whitney, Justin Williams, Eric Cole, Brett Hedican, Tim Gleason, Cam Ward. It's just one of those things where, for me, he got the job done. Yeah, he's a more vocal leader. Even now, he can probably jump on the ice right now and still put up 2 goals a game and still probably fight someone. But for the impact that Rod Brind'amour had, first year's captain, you go win the cup under the new rules. You go make another, conference final appearance. You don't finish any worse than third in your years as captain. Ron Francis, yeah, they kind of struggled before they went into the lockout season of 04-05. Finished 5th at one point, got a 3rd as well. But you look at Rod Brind'amour, yeah, they still finished 2nd in the division, still missed the playoffs just because of points at the time, of how the playoff formatting was. So, like I said, people can say it's a biased opinion. Maybe you can say someone else could be number one, but for me, it's Rod Brind'amour. You can say biased, unbiased, however you want to put it. Had an impact, man. Right from the start, got a cup win out of it. Got some Selkies. I really don't know how much more we can talk about. Like, you can go on and on about how great Rod Brind'amour is. That's just how it is. He's a cup winner. Made the all-rookie team in 89-90 just for added measure. And that was when he was with the Hurricanes. Like I said, won the cup, won some Selkies. He's done all the things you can ask of him and more. And for me, that's just how it is. To me, Rod Brind'amour is the greatest Carolina Hurricanes captain of all time. We're talking about 26 seasons of Carolina Hurricanes hockey, of 8 captains total. Yeah, it's a short list, but more impact. He had a bigger impact, done a lot more for the Hurricanes, and that's even before he became a coach. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Rod Brind'amour should be number one? How would you rate your top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains of all time? So like I said, go into the comments. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear it. I would like to see how wrong I am compared to if some people think that, your list is crazy. Ron Francis should be higher. The Stahl should be a lot lower. Let me know what you think. I'm really curious to see what everyone's top 5 would be for Carolina Hurricanes captains. But if you want to keep up with me on social media, you can follow me at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is Ella_Hurricanes. Click the link to my bio. You can find all of my articles at the Hockey Writers when it comes to the Hurricanes or the Chicago Wolves. You can hit the link to my other podcast, The Searchcast, where you can listen and watch that show. And for this show, you click the link to the podcast side of things. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review. If you're on the YouTube side of things, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know what you think of the podcast. Like I said, let me know in the comments who your top 5 would be and how you feel about my top 5 Carolina Hurricanes captains of all time. Make sure to share the podcast as well so that people become everydayers just like you, because we are over 900 subscribers. We are on the road to 1,000. And if we get to 1,000, I might do something special for you guys. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday episode of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone enjoys their Tuesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.